We came as volunteers in February of 2006, so 6 months after the storm, just like thousands of other people from all over the world came to help. And we were struck by kind of the quality of the people. The media would have you believe that everyone's lazy, a FEMA cheat, looking for something for nothing. And it's not true in New Orleans, and it's not true in St. Bernard. We saw residents who were 6 months after the storm, homeless and hungry. And we had to do something about that. We thought, I mean, it's really basic and kind of elemental. You think how you would want your family to be treated. We thought about that. We said we'd want our families to have homes, places to live, safe places to live, to raise families, let the senior citizens kind of enjoy their golden years. If that's what we'd want for our family, that's what we have to do for other people's family. So we moved down in June 2006, kind of rebuilt a shop here so we had space. We were going to have a tool co-op, but we started drywalling houses. The United Way funded us to drywall 20 houses, kind of just in their belief. We had no track record. I'm a public defender, and Liz ran a nonprofit group in DC, but it had to be done, so we said we'd do it. Volunteers came from everywhere. We drywalled a couple houses, and then we realized we were kind of doing harm because we were giving people hope. So we drywalled the houses. They thought that things would work themselves out, but they were stuck. So after that, we decided to finish houses. So now we take houses from totally gutted to move-in condition. It takes 8 to 12 weeks, about $10,000 worth of building supplies. Last year, we've rebuilt 70 houses. And the funding comes from foundations, from companies. Shell and General Electric have been really generous, the United Way has. But most of the funding just comes from volunteers. People come from all over the country, all over the world. They spend time down here, and they believe in the citizens of St. Bernard, so they give. They vote with their pocketbooks, and they vote with their feet. They vote with their feet by working, and they vote with their pocketbooks by supporting the rebuilding effort. The whole region took it. This disaster is one in which no one was really spared. Some folks' property and physical areas took a little bit harder than other areas, but everyone in the whole Gulf Coast either has friends or family or personally, everyone was decimated by the storm. In St. Bernard, they are nowhere close to being back. Before the storm, there were 67,000 people, 27,000 homes. 100% of the homes were damaged in the storm. 100% of the homes were rendered uninhabitable. So to start with, there was a lot of work. There's been no government support. The road home, which is supposed to be the funding cycle to bring people back, or the funding vehicle to bring people back, has supported funds for about 20% of the population. The rest of the population is just left on edge. They're living in FEMA trailers. It's not an uncommon thing at all for us to have clients come in needing our help, and they have 6 or 7 people living in a FEMA trailer. It's unfathomable. The community here, it's an interesting community because it's one in St. Bernard that's never had to ask for help in the past. These are folks who were independent and autonomous. They were working. They certainly weren't affluent, but they were independent. In St. Bernard, there was a 70% home ownership rate, which is really, really high. Before the storm, there was a 4% unemployment rate. So everyone was working, and they were making it work for them. The 70% home ownership rate means even more if you realize how much they were earning. The median household income before the storm was $38,000 a year. So this is a community that's very vested. They've never had to ask for help before. There are folks who believe in the government, believe in big business, so being abandoned by the government at really every stage. When the storm happened, they weren't rescued. It's not uncommon at all for people to wait 5-6 days to be rescued. The federal government came in after the Canadians came in, so they were abandoned then. The road home is just not there. Folks have a tough time making commitments and decisions if they don't know what sort of government resources are going to be there for infrastructure. People are just kind of desperate at this point. It's 2 years after the storm, and there's an incredibly significant percentage of the population living in FEMA trailers, and it's senior citizens living their supposed golden years in a FEMA trailer that we know is unhealthy. It's young kids, school-age kids, having their formative years growing up in FEMA trailers and all the stress that comes with it. The parents being too close to them, the alcoholism, the drug use, the mental health problems that are all, I think, endemic to living in inappropriately small confined, unhealthy spaces. So it's a tough time, but what's inspiring for us is the strength of the community, that they want to come back. I mean, all things being equal in a vacuum, I don't think any of us could say, walk around the neighborhood, wow, I'd want, my grandparents to retire here, I'd want to raise my kids here, this is where I'd want to start a family. But the residents want to come back, and they want to come back because of the community. They could probably find another apartment to rent in Austin or a job in Houston, but what they wouldn't have is the richness of their community and the family. It's not uncommon at all here for kids growing up to be able to walk to both grandparents' house, to have all their extended family within a 5-minute drive, and that's not something you can replicate anywhere else. So it's the residents' kind of hunger and resiliency to come back that keeps us going.
What are the barriers in terms of, I see a lot of the businesses around town are still boarded up. It seems like the economy took a huge hit here compared to some of the other areas. Can you describe just some of the barriers to people moving back in terms of that?
Sure. I mean, the first barrier, I think, is just the physical destruction. The whole parish had 7 to 20 feet of water right after the storm. It sat for 2 weeks. And, that puts an enormous physical toll on any community. And to fix that, it takes resources and labor, and the resources weren't there. And no one's going to volunteer and fix businesses for free. So there was just no support. It's like the government expects the community to come back without really investing in it. Folks, and it would have made a big difference if some of the national chains that had a presence here before the storm came back. They would have, if they came back, they would have clients and customers for life. Ultimately, the best thing would be for the government to honor the social compact between the citizens and the government. And this work should be done by the National Guard, by the Army Corps, by the government could create something like the WPA or the Civilian Conservation Corps, like they had after the Depression. I mean, this is really, I think, would have been a great opportunity for the government to lead and take care of its citizens. That's what the National Guard is really for. That's not happening. The government abdicated its role to the community here. That being said, I don't know. I think more bureaucracy would probably be worse than less, so I don't know if it makes sense to have a region-wide rebuilding committee. I think this stuff is local. And it's also not rocket science, It takes volunteers, building supplies, and supervision. Families can move home. But sometimes when you have big bureaucracies, they're playing defense, so the emphasis is less on getting things done and more on preventing, the wrong family from getting something. And that just doesn't work here. This is 2 years after the storm. We can't be playing defense. We gotta move forward. Yeah, the problem will still be here when the next president's elected, without a doubt. And sure, the government is a big, powerful entity. If the National Guard was assigned to do what our, high school students from Kansas or a retirees group from North Dakota is doing, it would get done a lot quicker. So certainly the government could make a difference if they chose. It's telling that the first candidate to articulate a plan is Barack Obama, but it was 2 years after the storm. So while I think his plan makes sense, it also would have made sense a year ago. And so, to be candidate seems like political expediency. If this seemed like the right thing to do, I'm sure it occurred to him 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 2 months ago, but he decides to unveil it right when the attention is there. That being said, at least he had the courage to do something and drive the issue. But, it's really shocking how both political parties have shirked any responsibility for leadership. If small groups like mine, if the church groups, if this stuff isn't rocket science to get it done. It just takes political will. And it's odd to me that the populist will, that the people in America care about this. They're voting, again, with their pocketbooks, they're voting with their feet. We have over 100 volunteers a week, and that's our small group alone. They're coming down here saying, it's part of our values to get families back home, American tax-paying families back home. But the government's just going the other way. It's like there's this massive disconnect. And so I think by doing nothing, the government is actually in reverse.